First, let's get to assembling your astrology journal. I'm providing an editable docx journal template that forms the skeleton and organizational structure of your journal. Don't print this out as is. You've got to scroll through it and edit as needed. This document is intended to be fully customizable. That's why it's a docx. Also, I say keep a digital soft copy of your journal and print it all out to keep a hard copy in your 3-ring binder. So do both. Add to this, modify, change it up, decorate, make it super personal and personalized to you. This has to be a document that you just love looking at. So you really need to work with the bare bones outline and fill it out into something that is so you. The more you it reflects, the more you're going to work with your astrology journal. And the more you work with your astrology journal, the deeper your studies are going to go. So don't discount the importance of bells and whistles. Really style this so it's yours. That's why I'm also providing you with loads of public domain grimoire images to spruce up your pages. Of course, since your book is privately yours, you can do all sorts of whatever you want, so really be creative. The purpose of your astrology journal is for it to become your go-to reference manual on all things astrology. When people ask you, what is your favorite go-to book on astrology? It's going to be this, your own astrology grimoire. That's what you should aspire for when assembling this thing. Once you've designed a workable outline and skeleton of your digital journal, print it out and assemble it into a 3-ring binder. I recommend printing the pages out single-sided so you have space on the back to write in additional notes by hand as you progress in your studies. Just always try to make sure the digital grimoire is the same thing as your print copy, so you always have access to both the hard 3-ring binder and also the soft copy on your digital device. These are going to be your section dividers. You'll want to get a set of 8 tab section dividers for your binder, or just make your own. Here you can see I made my own, and my set of section dividers will be different from what I've structured for you because yours is going to be based on, beginner astrology. You'll add more sets of 8 dividers as you go along for like horary divination reference material, writing sun sign horoscopes, manual calculation formulas, and references for physis, and so on. Here is something else I want you to do. Print out this glossary of astrology terms I've provided with you among your course materials. Print it out double-sided and add it to the back of your 3-ring binder astrology grimoire. That way, anytime you're working and you need quick reference to unknown terminology, you can go straight to the glossary instead of having to try to find it in the hundreds of pages you'll have accumulated by then. Think of your astrology journal as organic and constantly in growth. Add to it freely, but just as freely take out of it. Remember, the Microsoft Word document I'm giving you is a minimalist, bare bones skeleton for you to fill out and customize, customize, customize. You really have to make this thing unique and yours. So the process of learning really happens while you're filling out your astrology grimoire or your journal. I was thinking about whether or not I should transfer some of the information from the workbooks into the grimoire or the journal template and basically have it set up for you, but I actually decided against it. I think that the actual process of having to fill it out yourself, to write it, to regurgitate the information that you're getting from the workbook is going to help you retain that information better. So really do go along as you work through the workbook, do go along and fill out your grimoire, and whatever you find interesting from the workbook, transfer it over into your grimoire. Some of it you can pretty much handwrite, some of it you can pretty much print out. So for example, you do have the PDF. If there's a particular section you really want to retain as part of your own journal, just print out those pages, hole punch them, and put them into your own journal. And if there are just like bits and pieces of information, then handwrite that in. But yeah, definitely slowly as you go through the course, integrate parts of the workbook that really work for you into your own astrology grimoire. And eventually by the end of class, you will have a pretty filled out grimoire or astrology journal that reflects the retaining of information from the workbook that you really wanted to keep and take with you from this point on. Also, take field trips with your study journal. So for example, take it with you to the public library. And then while you're there, check out a whole stack of astrology books and start going through old astrology books like this one from the 80s. And just look at what they have to say about the various angular aspects, what Saturn conjunct the moon mean, what Saturn conjunct, Mercury means, and write that into your journal. There are sections in the skeleton that show where you can put that information in, and just write it in and slowly build up your journal and slowly build up your wealth of knowledge. And also scrapbook. So for example, while you're searching the internet, if you come across a interesting blog post or an article on astrology that really intrigues you and you want to include it in your reference material, print it out, 3-hole punch it, and add it to the right section in this book. Same with the workbook that I gave you. If there are sections in the workbook that you really want to integrate into your journal, print out just those sections. That's why I gave you the PDF. So you can print out very specific isolated sections that resonate the most with you, print those out, and incorporate it into your journal. Definitely think about scrapbooking. If there's interesting images, interesting diagrams, tables, any reference material, scrapbook that into your journal so that it really becomes filled with your source of knowledge for all things astrology. Okay, I'll say it. I'll go into the woo. So something magical really does happen when you go through the dedicated and very devoted process of putting together sort of like an astrology grimoire or an astrology journal, because the exercise of it is so dedicated and there's so much devotion that's going to be really infused into this process, this practice, that I feel like there's greater spirits out there, the astrology spirits of old, the ascended masters of astrology of all time. Take notice, maybe, who knows? And I just feel like there's the universe, so to speak, does give you a boost. They see your dedication, they see your devotion to the craft, and give you help. I really believe that from the bottom of my heart. I feel that I've advanced quickly in certain studies because I put forth and show my proactive devotion to the craft. And then I genuinely feel like there's something around me that's beyond me that helps and points me in the right direction when I need it and boosts me when I need that, and sort of plants resources in front of me so that my path is clear and precise and also enriched. So that's sort of the crazy side of it. I really believe strongly that you need to create this devoted journal of some kind and work at it proactively, because it's an act of devotion. And by this act of devotion, I think some sort of greater lineage of people who've all gone before us that have been in this craft do take notice maybe and include you into that community, that greater community of sorts, that consciousness. You become a member of that specific vibration of consciousness. I'm getting very new agey, I'm so sorry. But I really do, I think something happens. So that's why, really at the core of it, that's why I'm telling you to keep this astrology journal, because something inexplicable does happen. That's the snap, that's the catalyst, that's the synapses that happens, and that's what I want to impart on you in this course. If you take nothing away, take that, just the astrology journal, and really dedicate yourself to that so that you can connect again to that sort of specific vibrational consciousness and have like the members of that particular vibrational consciousness come down and help you and incorporate you into this craft so that you do advance very, very quickly and you learn very quickly. I know a lot of people think astrology is difficult, and there really is sort of this entry barrier. I really believe there is some kind of a spiritual entry barrier to astrology. You see that a lot of people are interested in horoscopes, but to get past that hump and into that realm of deep advanced study of astrology does take this extra something from inside of you, this inner drive. But that drive, I don't know if it's always enough, because there's so many different, like I said, paradigms and different forms of astrology. There's so many differences of opinion. How do you find that clear single voice in that sea of voices so that you actually can learn? I mean, you look at 6 different sites on astrology and they'll give you 6 different correspondences for planetary rulers, essential dignities, and modern approach versus traditional approach under the term traditional approach, there's like 10 different approaches. Under the term modern approach, there's like 15 different approaches. Do you know what I'm saying? So how do you hear that one true voice, true in quotation marks for you? What is your path? How do you hear that voice so you can have a rock solid foundation in this craft? I do believe that there has to be something, some higher consciousness activity going on. However you want to express that, there is something going on. And if you show your devotion and you step forward and show your dedication to this particular branch of metaphysical study, the astrology spirits of old do come and do help you. I promise you. It's a very weird, creepy, strange, well, it's not creepy, but it's a strange thing that really does happen. And that's the core of what I want to instruct to you. I mean, that's pretty much all you need. You don't even need the workbook, to be quite honest. I wrote 500 pages for nothing. That's what you need to take away. You need to show your devotion, show your dedication, that initiative, and you do that through an act like keeping an astrology journal. Putting this thing together takes so much dedication. And when you do that, I do think something really incredible will happen to you, and you're going to find yourself far surpassing everybody else in your astrological studies. Okay, now let's talk about the workbook, the meat and potatoes of this class. So what I've done here is give you two versions of the workbook. One workbook version is the whole 500 plus pages as a complete document. That's pretty useful if you're going to read it on your e-reader or on the computer, or you just want to have it on file with you, a soft copy to go over. Now, if you want to print it, I don't recommend printing it as the 500-page complete book. Rather, you should go for the 2-volume set. So I also offer a 2-volume version. Now, the 2-volume version is not actually split. Like, I didn't take the full version and just cut it in half. I actually took out just the middle section on, you know, the signs, houses, planets, and asteroids, and put that into one single book. So that's volume 2. Volume 1 is pretty much the beginning and the end of the complete book, and then that whole middle section, which is supposed to be the planets and houses and signs, I put in a separate book. I figured that's actually easier to work with so that you can actually use them in tandem, and use volume 2 as a reference when you're going through some of the exercises in the back half or the latter half of volume 1. Anyway, it's self-guided. So for example, if you're using the 2-volume set, when you get to the section where you're supposed to move on to volume 2, there will be a page in volume 1 that tells you now you should put a bookmark in volume 1 and skip on over to volume 2. Then when you finish volume 2, it'll tell you to return back to volume 1 where you left off, and then finish the course through volume 1. I know it's kind of weird that I did it that way, that I pulled out the middle and put it in its own separate second volume instead of cutting it in half. The reason I chose to do that was because I wanted to keep all of the sort of reference material that's related to the planets, houses, and signs as one cohesive book, so that you wouldn't have to keep turning back and forth. That section should be learned as a chunk, so it made sense to keep it as one chunk in terms of a book. Now, in terms of what I just said about reference material, this book is not meant to be published. I'm actually working on a book on astrology that's going to be a reference book on astrology. So the book I'm writing that I hope to get published will have information like, you know, what the sun in Cazimi means, sun in conjunctions, or for example, the sun, the various sun aspects, or the various moon aspects in Eris, one of the dwarf planets we recently discovered about 10 years ago. Just all of those things, I like one by one, which is what your astrology journal should be. You'll see from the skeleton. I'm actually writing a reference book on that. That's going to be much bigger than holistic tarot, actually. So it's going to be an interesting and daunting project. But that book at some point is going to be published. It's going to be a very different book from the workbook. The workbook is not meant to be a reference book. It's meant to teach astrology. And so it's teaching astrology through giving you a quick overview, a quick synopsis of what you need to know, and then going straight into exercises. And then you really learn through those exercises. So do the exercises. Most of them have sample answers. The sample answers, you know, it's really hard because people are going to disagree. There's so many ways to read how a planet is in terms of its environment. So for example, if Jupiter is in conjunct with Saturn in Taurus, what does that mean? I mean, I think astrologers, there's foundational core energies that they might agree with, but there's going to be very different opinions in terms of how it plays out in somebody's life. So just be careful and be mindful of that. The only reason I give model answers is because people sometimes just want something to compare what they've written to, and that's all it is. It doesn't mean if what you've written is different from that, it's wrong. You just have to know what the core essential meanings of the planets, signs, etc. are, and then use that to guide how you answer the questions. The answer, the model or sample answer that I provide is just an example of how one astrologer might approach that. And then just sort of take it for that. You know what I'm saying? And another thing, please don't allow this to be published. I'm really asking you to do the honorable thing and not cause these workbooks to be published. They are meant to be unpublished. I put them together specifically for this class so that somebody could use the workbook to actively learn astrology. And that's going to contain a lot of the preliminary instructional material from the book I plan on publishing, but a lot of it is when, like you said, you'll see it. It's like a workbook where you have to write in the answers. Also, even if there's just one sample of the exercise in the workbook or maybe a couple of samples, I provide you with a file folder absolutely filled with lots of public and historical figures and their charts and Placidus and whole signs. So practice the same exercise multiple times over and over again with the public and historical figures. I think it works to start learning on public and historical figure charts because you can look up their biographies. And of course, it's not going to align perfectly. And of course, there's so much we obviously don't know about these people, especially their internal lives. But it is interesting to see how the facts of their biography can sometimes align with things in their charts. And when you see that, it's much easier to learn the essential meanings of the planets and houses and angular aspects. So that's the reason I include it, because it's just one easy way to really quickly learn the essential meanings of the planets and signs. So definitely do that. Okay, and that's pretty much it in terms of getting you acclimated into this course with my talking head. I told you that this is not a course taught through video lectures. It's workbook intensive. You're going to learn through the workbook and learn from the proactive and dedicated practice of putting together your astrology grimoire or your astrology journal. That's how you're going to be learning the materials from this class. So there will be a concluding video, so I will see you at the end when you have finished through the 2 workbooks. This is a self-paced class. Take it in your own time and enjoy.